But the language in the infancy narrative in chapter 2, verse 7. So let's see. All went to be enrolled each. Well, let me. Here goes beginning of chapter 2. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world would be enrolled. So it's a census. This was the first enrollment when Quirinius was governor of Syria. So that's a problem because Quirinius didn't do a census at this time. The census that we know of that Quirinius did was like in 7 or 8 CE. So it's almost a decade or more after we know of Jesus's birth. So this must be either made up or something going on. The second thing that needs to be said about that is it would be virtually impossible to require people to travel to their ancestral home for a census. They didn't do that because it would have totally disrupted the economy. It would have disrupted, worker relations, with their employers, and they would have nothing to do with that. The Romans, they would not do such a thing. So that's a very difficult problem. Then all went to be enrolled, each to his own city. Okay, right. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. So that tells me that, whoever wrote this is later in the 1st century or early 2nd century when this David, son of David stuff is percolating, okay? Like we talked about last time. Which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, okay, to be enrolled with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to be delivered, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling cloths, and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. Okay. I have to pause this for a second and run and get something. Give me just a second. Okay.
Recording stopped.
I'll be right back.
Well, hello everybody on a Saturday afternoon. How we doing?
Well, hello.
Hey.
Hi, Miss Mary.
We interested, y'all. That's why we here.
I'm tired.
You never get enough of learning, especially from this professor.
I know.
Amen. Thank you.
That's why we're here.
I'm pushing all I got.
Right.
I'm telling you.
And the more we listen, the more we learn.
That's
what we have to do. Mm-hmm.
And he has been up under so many authors. It's unreal.
Okay.
Amen.
All right. So
He's back.
I have a member who is close to transition. Took her communion on Thursday with some friends from church, and I keep some things, so that's kind of weird, but like I keep when kids like do drawings for me in church. My kids used to do that, so I have a whole box full of my kids' drawings in church. Like they're drawing the story of that I'm preaching about or something, and kids do that, and I have them and I save that stuff. And this member of my church that's getting close to going to heaven sent me this for Christmas last year. You see that?
That cardboard, that's beautiful. What is that?
It was a Christmas card. Yeah.
Yeah.
Caprice. It's a pop-up Christmas card.
That's cute.
Yeah. So this is I'm gonna, when she passes at her funeral, I'm gonna pull that out and also show people her Bible, because man, she's worn her Bible out. anyway, there was no room for them in the inn. Angela, is she still here? Angela, are you still here? What does Kenneth Bailey say about this?
It's completely inaccurate. Much like most of the nativity tradition that everybody, honors and celebrates every year, it's completely inaccurate.
Wow.
It's something that I can't. We have in the last couple of years, but in every church that I've served, there's almost always been like a Christmas pageant kind of thing, where the kids are given roles. Somebody's Mary, somebody's Joseph, somebody's a shepherd, and it's a wooden creche, like a lean-to kind of thing, with the animals, and that ain't how it happened, unfortunately. And Kenneth Bailey is the scholar that helped us to understand this, and he did, the research that he did. The word katalima is a different word from inn. Luke uses a word for inn called, the word is pandocheon, and it's used both in the gospel and in the Acts of the Apostles. In the gospel, it's a word that's used when the Good Samaritan, comes along and puts the injured man on his animal and takes him to an inn. It's a pandocheon. It doesn't take him to a katalima. What is Bailey, Angela? What does Bailey say a katalima actually is? Do you remember? It's a guest room in a clan
an extension of the house. Yeah.
Yes. So you go to your anybody. Some houses were very simple. There were just one room houses, and they couldn't afford to do extensions. But you see in the archaeological evidence that as families grew, they literally would build rooms onto their main room for like the new bride and groom to live in. So it's a very different understanding of family relations. I mean, nowadays families live separate. They live in distances from each other. But back then, they did it to survive, and they did it to support each other. And a katalima was like a guest room in a clan home. And it could be a second level kind of thing. Let me show you some of the pictures I have. So the following image, this is of a late 19th, early 20th century Bedouin home. The home itself would be much older than that, but the photograph is from the late 19th, early 20th century. And I want you to note the animal, it's singular, in the home. It is not an inn, and it is not an outdoor stable. It is a home in the Bethlehem area.
Wow.
You see the donkey? So the next image is of a stable area devised out of a depressed area in the earth over which a home had been built. This is also in the Bethlehem area. Note that the stable is part of the home. So you're in the upper part of the home, or the main room of the home, looking down on the stable area. Now, the following images are of a home in the Negev region south of Bethlehem, but it's not that far from Bethlehem. And this is these are buildings from late antiquity, like the 5th or 6th century. As an example of the way stables were built into the homes immediately next to the living area for humans, it also illustrates that this was a centuries old practice. And I want you to note where the mangers are. This is one of them. This is where the animals would have been, and the people lived on the other side. These windows separate the living area of the humans from the living area of the animals. And see the mangers and the windows. So I'm going to come back to this one. The windows. There would have been mangers, okay, along here between the living area, human living area, and the animals. This is, I think, a photograph that I took. This one too. So this is another home right next to this one, where you see. I don't know if I can't remember if we're standing in the animal area, looking into the human area, or vice versa. But the mangers are in the windows. These are ancient practices. This is not something that just sort of popped up. I mean, they did this for millennia, you know. Now the diagrams of Kenneth Bailey from his website. I'm not even sure if his website is running anymore or available anymore. But if this is from a top-down view, so the stable, and then the steps up to the family living room, the mangers, like I described. This is a lower area. And then the catalima, or the guest room, next to the family living room. So this is from a side view, the door into, the entryway into the stable area, and then the steps up or down, you know, up to the living area or down into the stable area. And they brought the animals in to protect them from thieves and the elements. But it also provided heat. You know, the animals' heat would sort of gravitate upwards, you know, to where the humans were living. They would also, you know, take the dung and use it for fuel, you know, for their fires. This is an icon. Some of the older icons show Jesus being born in a grotto. These older Orthodox icons. And a grotto is a cave. It's just a cave. So it's a little more accurate, you know, to the depiction of what happened. Old icon, you know, of Jesus being born in a grotto. This becomes the medieval image of it, you know. I don't know if this is Giotto or not, but you know, this is what we get in our Christmas pageants, right? I think this might be Giotto. I think it's in Florence too. There are these. I hope you get a chance to go to Florence and see these. It's Giotto's paintings are just phenomenal, and these monks were privileged to live in these tiny little cells, these tiny little rooms that were painted with Giotto's paintings. So, the date of the infancy narrative is an issue. If you read 3:1, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate became governor of Judea and so forth, right? We talked about this, you know, earlier. Then it goes into Isaiah, as is written in the book by the words of Isaiah the prophet, the voice of one crying in the wilderness. He connect that back with 1 to 4, the introduction of Luke's gospel, it almost works like Mark. It's unique to Luke, but it still almost works just like Mark. And all of the chapters 1 and 2, almost all of the chapters 1 and 2, with the exception of the introduction in chapter 1, are L source. Okay. So as we saw, Fitzmyer and others grapple with this. Fitzmyer more so, I think, than the others, but they grapple with this. The earliest traditions embedded in the Gospels have Jesus as son of Joseph and Mary. And I would direct you to the work of Andrew Lincoln on this. The infancy narratives and genealogies were composed later, I think roughly at the same time, because they're trying to address the evolving and increasing intensity of Christology, the Christological controversies going on because of those conversations that were happening. Okay. And it's raising the level of an already high Christology. Okay. It asserts a higher Christology than Paul. For Paul, Jesus was proclaimed Son of God on the basis of the resurrection, not on the basis of his birth. This appears to be the case because through Romans 1. To me, this is a huge part of the discussion. Paul did not know the virgin birth tradition. Mark, and I'm doing these in order. I think James probably should be bumped up the chronological order here with Paul. Mark did not know the virgin birth tradition. John did not know the virgin birth tradition. James did not know the virgin birth tradition. It only appears in 2 very different accounts added to the beginnings of Matthew and Luke. And you have to figure out whether that's end of the 1st century or early 2nd century. I think I didn't post these sources for you. I did notice that the other day, but in order to grasp, in my opinion, in order to grasp the context of the discussion going on about this increasing Christological description of Jesus, you need to read texts like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas or the Infancy Gospel of James, which is also called the Proto-Evangelium of James, which was mentioned in our last session, which becomes one of the early traditions used by the Roman Catholic Church to talk about the sinlessness of Mary, because the Immaculate Conception grows out of the Infancy Gospel of James or the Proto-Evangelium of James, because Mary's father is pronounced sinless or without sin as a priest in the temple. You have to read it for yourself. Ignatius of Antioch is the first theologian of the early church to emphasize the importance of the virgin birth. So you have it showing up in Matthew's gospel and Luke's gospel. Then there's nothing. There's nothing. And there's Matthew and Luke, and then there's nothing, and then there's Ignatius. Okay. And Justin Martyr talks about it in the middle of the 2nd century. That's why I put Matthew and Luke infancy narratives in the 2nd century, because that's when it was being discussed. Okay. What does that say about, so that's, let's raise the obvious question. What does that say about the divinity of Jesus? I don't think it does any harm to the divinity of Jesus at all. If that's something that's really special to you, it's just clarifying where it comes from and where the language and the stories come from, why they were important. You can see, as I said, a really high Christology in the early sources. So, yeah. Let's stop there before we move on. If you have any other questions or comments about this.
So just to reiterate, you're saying that there was a high Christology even with Paul and James, whatever. So there has been a high Christology throughout the development of the New Testament, but it's, I forget that cook's name, but kicked up a notch in the 2nd century for whatever reason.
Yeah, it develops. Yeah, well, it's like how when you get into an argument with something, it can escalate. And you see this in John's Gospel. We're going to talk about this in the development of the Johannine tradition, how arguments can escalate, and they can escalate pretty quickly. You don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah? Well, Jesus is God. So if you don't believe Jesus is Messiah, you don't believe in God. That's sort of how it develops in John's Gospel, in the Johannine tradition. I mean, the polemics. We live in a time, especially in an ecumenical culture, where polemics are not encouraged. Right? Polemics are kind of passe. You want to present a calm and kind and inclusive argument. That's not what it was like in the 1st century, or even in the centuries before the 1st century and after. They ripped each other to pieces, and I think that needs to be really clearly understood. Whether we think it's right or wrong, I find some really super conservative fundamentalist type folks who reject critical thinking about the scriptures to be very mean in their polemic against people who use critical methods in reading the Bible. I think I even find them to be quite mean and cantankerous in the way that they deal with their own people. This is nothing new under the sun either. Josephus talks about how the Sadducees were like that. They were rude and boorish to their own people, but I think even though we have that kind of a context, we still have to be, I think, honest and clear about how it was back then. And just say, well, we don't want to be like that. We can still say it happened this way, but that doesn't mean it has to happen this way. That way, still today. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that, it is hard for people to reconcile their, like, somehow if you agree with the, critical perspectives of things, that somehow it makes you less faithful. It's like if you're saying that you don't that you understand the infancy narrative, was embellished later on to justify people believing that Jesus was Christ, somehow makes you less faithful of a person. And that's not true. But I think that people do have a hard time reconciling that. They, they tend to feel like if they do not agree or, align with all of it, that somehow they're not as devout, I guess. And it is like something that's so precious for people. And so, when you're preaching and planting seeds of historical criticism, you have to be really gentle, but at the same time, provoke their thoughts, that's what I try to do. And it does, I think it does us good to remind everyone that all of this was human written. Because right now history is being written and rewritten in ways that 1,000 years from now is going to be portrayed in a certain way. And we just have to keep remembering that it's got human fingerprints all over it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also, it just occurred to me you didn't hit record again when you came back.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I just noticed that.
Wow, Angela, kind of late, aren't you?
Sorry, I just noticed.
There's like no excuse for that.
I'm slacking.
Recording in progress.
Where was I? Where was I? I didn't record. I'll have to go back.
It was all like at the very beginning of the infancy narrative stuff.
I paused it when I went to go get this, right?
Right.
Where was that?
I just noticed the red dot was gone, and I'm like, oh no.
Okay. I'll go through that. I'll have to make that a separate, or just doggone it. You are the special knowledge folks that doggone.
Hey, Dr. Waddell. I have an audio recording of that short segment. I can just clip that and share it if you'd like. You don't have to redo it. I'm just letting you know.
Oh, okay. And then thank you, Swan. Then can you post it on the course site?
Yeah, yep, it's recording. Yes. So I'll do that after we end today. So I'll check, and I do have that recorded.
And then everybody will have the slides. I'm gonna go back here now that it's recorded. So you can see, it's right about right here, wasn't it? So you can see each slide and listen to the recording and stop the recording as you're able to.